I have a fascinating conversation for you today about how to break your ego defense. Now, your ego defense is that part of your brain that gets triggered and it protects us when we believe we're being attacked or someone has slighted or offended us. Our ego defenses get activated, especially when we're at work. Come on. You know that person who says something to you and then you immediately want to jump down their throat. Well, today we're going to try and change that. In this episode, you will meet Katherine McCord. Katherine has dedicated her career to growing inclusion and better people operations everywhere. As someone who's passionate about diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives, Katherine creates safe spaces for people to discuss, learn, and grow personally and professionally. Katherine and I discuss why we shouldn't be afraid of unintentionally getting DEI initiatives wrong, what it's like to be on the other side of the HR desk knowing that HR has no power in certain organizations, how to deal with ageism in our careers, and why we could all benefit from being a little more like our grandmother. Let's get started. Welcome back to the Mid-Career GPS podcast. This is episode 153. I'm your host, John Neuro. I help mid-career professionals who feel stuck, undervalued, and underutilized show up to find a job they love or love the job they have by using my proven 4-step formula. Before we get started, I've got something free for you. It's my brand new guide. It is called 5 Mistakes Mid-Career Professionals Make and Need to Stop Doing. You can get this career guide on my website at johnneral.com, or you can check the show notes. My guide's going to help you clear your brain, get you focused on making your career transition, as well as giving you some actionable steps to create your next advancement opportunity. I'd love for you to get the free guide and let me help you. All you need to do is go visit my website at johnneral.com or check the show notes. Now, as a neurodiverse woman, Katherine McCord speaks about and educates people on various diversity, equity, and inclusion topics. In our conversation, Katherine opens up about her career and her background, and also talks to us about why we are simply going to screw up at times when it comes to addressing various inclusion issues. And she says that that's okay as long as we approach it from a place of curiosity. Katherine and I cover a lot in this episode, including a touching story about her grandmother you will not want to miss. So, my friends, it is my pleasure to introduce you to Katherine McCord.
Hi, my name is Katherine McCord. I work in people operations consulting across the nation. What that means is the people side of HR. I've also designed inclusive HR technologies, and I teach and educate on inclusion, particularly neurodiverse inclusion, but also other types as well across the country and even internationally.
Katherine, I am so looking forward to this conversation. And since this is the Mid-Career GPS podcast, what I'm curious as we get started here is, we all have this mid-career moment that defines or shapes our career. Would you please share with us what yours was?
Sure. I was trucking along and doing a lot of recruiting and sort of HR type consulting. And I ended up taking a W-2 job in the middle of that just seemed really interesting. It was a great opportunity to build out a whole recruiting department and a whole new HR aspect to a company. So I dove in and I got an email one day. And I've seen this kind of thing throughout my career. So I do want to say this was not the first time this happened, but I'll get into why this one impacted me so much. So we'd gotten a new role and I got an email from the hiring manager saying, I don't want to see any Black or female candidates for this position. I stopped, took a deep breath, and first I emailed the person back, asked them to come see me. We had a conversation about why that wasn't appropriate. and how we were going to actually be pursuing the role. And then I sent the information to upper management. And this is the moment that hit me like a freight train, was the response I got from the VP of a major company, and I am talking over like 10,000 people, responded to me and said, well, I see his point. And
We're
then
just gonna let that pause there for like the eyes to get really big and the jaws to drop and everything. Yeah. Okay.
And so I, from that point on, I started pivoting more towards forcing the inclusion aspect and educate when in my work, which I'd always pushed for, but I started really being very particular about it. And I started doing more education, and helping people understand what was still going on, how it needed to be fixed, and why these things don't matter, that type of thing, and or why certain things do matter, whichever case it is. And so that was a really big moment. It was honestly a matter of integrity, and you have to run towards integrity or you lose yourself. So that was a big pivot moment for me.
Thank you for sharing that. That is such a powerful story. And I'm sitting here admittedly shocked, but not shocked, right? Because we know,
Right. Yeah.
sadly,
Tragically unshocked.
tragically unshocked. I like that. I'm gonna steal that from you. That's really good there. In your introduction, you describe yourself as a neuro and physically diverse woman.
Yeah.
Can you please explain to us specifically what that means?
Sure, absolutely. So I'm going to start off by giving a few definitions of each of those things. So neurodiversity very simply refers to it's actually had many meanings over the years, but right now there's a big neurodiversity movement, and it very specifically refers to a medically visible and or diagnosable difference in how a person processes information, and stimuli. So you can think ADHD, dyslexia, autism, bipolar, certain forms of epilepsy. Actually, surprisingly to many people, gender dysphoria can actually be a visible neurodiversity. And so that's what that means. And so I do have several neurodiversities. The two I talk about the most are my OCD. I am, and not what a lot of people think of. I do everything in even numbers. I categorize my M&Ms, things like that. So, and it actually helps me in my work some because it helps me be very organized and very meticulous.
Sure.
And then I have bipolar one and some interesting manifestations there. And so, I talk a lot about how, yeah, there are struggles, obviously, but the mania is actually a superpower because, I mean, nobody works like me when I'm manic. It is like nothing you've ever seen before. So, so I do have those. And the physically diverse, I have more health problems than most 80-year-olds. We were just discussing one before the
We
show.
were, yeah.
This is funny. I actually literally had years ago, my employer was offering Aflac as supplemental insurance. Highly recommend, by the way, and a little free plug for Aflac there. And then I had one of their agents call me and they said, "Oh, Miss McCord, we're so sorry. We must have your birth date wrong. We just were calling to correct this." And so I gave it to them and they said, "Wait a minute, are you Miss McCord, blah, blah, and you have this, 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 and this?" I said, "Yeah." And they go, "Oh my God, we're so sorry. We just assumed you were older." So I
Wow.
totally legit thought my birth year just had to be wrong. I thought that was very funny. They immediately apologized and were embarrassed, but I thought it was hilarious. Um, so, so I have that. There is physical diversity. I have a legal disability, and there are two medical disabilities that I have, but I tell people I do not have the social disability and I do not have a medical disability to the point that I cannot work. So there's kind of three different sections of disability and I don't fall into all of them. But so that's kind of what that means. And a woman is relatively obvious. I am both biologically female and I identify as female.
Yes. And I just want to take a moment and just thank you for sharing that and being so open with us. It's clearly it's part of your story. It's what shapes your career.
Yeah.
But as we talked about before, in an age where we are more diversity, equity, and inclusive aware, and we
Right.
should be, it's very affirming to hear you share your story and what that means, because for many of the people who are listening who they might have someone on their team that has a neuro or physical
Right.
uh, thing that they're dealing with, right? This just helps them come from a greater place of awareness and grace, which
Right.
I just appreciate that with you.
Thank you.
In talking about this leadership conversation, though, especially when we think about DEI, what are some of the things that you can offer as advice for a rising star, a mid-career leader and professional who just wants to be more inclusive and more affirming, but is also afraid that they're going to screw up and get something wrong and it's not their
Well,
intent?
oh no. Well, first of all, please understand at some point you will screw up and it's okay. It is okay. All right. As long as you respond appropriately to your screw up, that is okay. So here's what I mean by that. And this still happens to me, folks. So I eat, live, and breathe this stuff every day.
Mm-hmm.
And I still will occasionally say something and someone will go, hey, just so you know, that doesn't work for me or that's not inclusive for me because, and I respond and we fix it and then we move on. Um, the main thing that you can do is to learn to break your ego defense. So that is a very naturally occurring phenomenon. So our brains naturally that we need to be right. They're designed that way. And so when your brain hears something that is contrary or that tells it that it is wrong or has processed something incorrectly, it automatically does what we call the ego defense and starts throwing up reasons why no, it's right, no, it's right, no, it's right. And so that's where you see people immediately firing back with how they're correct and all of that. That's natural. It's also not helpful. So,
Mm-hmm.
and it's not something that we actually need to be using anymore. So instead, respond with curiosity. So train yourself that when you feel that ego defense coming, stop, breathe, and think to yourself, this is not an attack because it's not. The person is not saying you're bad, you're evil, anything that they're telling you that this does not work for them. Even if they might be saying it a little bit aggressively, that's what they're actually saying to you is that what you're doing is making them uncomfortable. So breathe and respond with saying, please tell me more about that. Or how can I do better? When you respond with curiosity, not ego, that fixes so many problems in life,
Yes.
not just in work, in life. This is life advice right here. It really works. Also, don't be afraid to ask for help. People miss that a lot. I once had the opportunity to build out a department, another recruiting department, and it was really actually a whole recruiting business, and it was really fun. And I was adjacent to another company. We were kind of sister companies, and I was allowed to poach whomever I wanted. And I took some of the creme de la creme. And one of the people was epically failing, which meant that I was epically failing because I knew that this person was very capable. And yet we were just butting heads. It was one of those, we had conflicting neurodiversities. And so that was stressful. But I went to this person's former leader and I told him what was happening. They started laughing, came in the room, um, and just started asking this employee, what do you need? What do you need? And started fixing out and looked at me and said, did you ever bother to ask what they needed? And I was like, oops.
Yeah.
And so it was just that moment of like, oopsie daisy, Catherine. And this was many, many years ago, late 20s, Catherine. Um, and it was a great learning moment. And the person knew me, and so it was just funny to them. They're like, really, you're going to miss this. Of all the things you catch, you're going to miss this. And it was as simple as just asking them but then asking another manager for help. You
Mm-hmm.
were successful with this person. What can I do? So if you have somebody who maybe another manager has or another leader has learned to manage somebody similar very well, go to them and ask how they did it.
Yeah.
What are some of the methods that you're using? So again, break your ego down and go over and ask for help. And then don't be afraid to ask these employees and your team what they need. Just outright and then do it. Don't ask and then not do it. Or don't argue with them about it. Just do it.
Right. I appreciate that advice so much because in the opportunity about being curious, we get to be vulnerable.
Yeah.
And so being able to be vulnerable and have somebody receive that. I remember earlier on in my career, and I'm going to go back probably about 18 years or so ago. So I'm going to couch this and phrase this as the Will and Grace era. So if you remember the TV show Will and
Got it.
Grace,
Got it.
I was walking into a meeting with an administrator, and we were meeting with parents who were a same-sex couple.
Okay.
And right before we went into the meeting, the administrator looks at me and says, "How do I address them?" And I there was like, you know how your brain processes things and like so quickly and stuff. And I looked at him and I went, "Mrs. Smith and Mrs. Smith?" And he went, "Oh, okay." And like, and like there was this, I was like, "It's okay." And I remember saying, I was like, "Thank you for asking."
Yes.
Right. Like, I think that's so important that like,
Yeah.
if we, I love what you talk about with the ego defense too, is just, recognizing where it's coming from.
Yes.
But in the curiosity, we can do a lot more good.
Exactly. It's natural. People think automatically means that you're stubborn and all this. No, that's not it. It's just a natural defense that your body is going, hey, wait a minute, I don't know this, but I need to be right. And you don't. You just need to learn. And that's so funny. That's so funny. But yeah, just ask. It's so simple, and be willing to receive and then adjust
Hmm.
for your information that you receive. I think
Yeah.
and so I love that. He's like, oh, okay, yeah, I could do that, Mrs. Smith and Mrs. Smith.
Yeah.
There you go.
There you
Duh.
go. There you go. Katherine, I wanna pivot here just a little bit because with your extensive HR background and in your work in helping people as they navigate their career paths as well, you bring a lot of experience from being on the other side of the HR desk. And so, what I'm curious to know from you here is what what do you want mid-career professionals to know about what it's like being on the other side of the HR desk as they navigate their career path, both be it internally inside the organization or when they're applying for jobs and they're looking to go somewhere else?
Right. One of the first things I like to let people know, because there's a lot of misunderstandings about this out there, is that HR has virtually no power. And I think that's really important to understand. So I see a lot of posts, and some are correct, and but a lot are not, about what HR should be doing and all this. Well, it would be great. HR wishes they could do those things too. Trust me,
Right.
because what's actually happened is HR has no actual power. Like, they can't go after people that are doing bad things if leadership won't let them. They can't. They really are not a checks and balances system. And that's not how it was set up. Now it should be. Okay, I want to clarify that also. It should be, but it's not. So a lot of the things that you see in job seeking processes that are frustrating, actually not designed by HR. A lot of the things that you experience in onboarding and training, not HR. And when you're dealing with a frustrating manager and you're like, or let's say something awful has happened to you, you've had to file a complaint with HR, and they are, quote, not doing anything about it. 99 times out of 100, they're trying really hard and leadership is stopping them and saying no. So that's very important to understand, is that a lot of times your HR people want to help you, but they're not given the power to actually do so. So it's very important to understand HR has a lot of knowledge. They can have sway if they've bothered to build up their relationships, which HR folks build up your relationships, um, and things like that. But honestly, a lot of times there's not very much that they can do. How you can use HR if you want to career pivot or grow in your career, that kind of thing, is you can use them to get a lot of insight, because they're in a lot of these meetings. They know what these people are really looking for, what kinds of things make them personally tick. So you can get a lot of insights as to how to be successful in the next steps of your interview by having those conversations with them and getting them to really break these folks down for you. But outside of that, that's actually kind of my biggest tip, is use them that way, but also understand that they're very limited as to what they can do for you, sadly.
Thank you for sharing that. And that's really helpful, especially as people are navigating whatever's going on in their career. The
Yeah.
other thing that we talked about pre-interview, though, had to do with ageism.
Oh, yeah.
And so what tips do you have for addressing ageism in the workplace?
Oh, so many. Um, really,
True, right?
I have so many, honestly. I have so one thing that I always tell people from the perspective of you're the one having to battle ageism is make sure that you tie everything back to your capabilities. Acknowledge the fears that they have and then combat them actively. So, and I don't mean combat like be hostile. Please don't do that. That's counterproductive. But actively work against their biases. So a lot of times people think that um, that older people can't learn, that people over a certain age are stubborn, that people over a certain age are going to retire at any moment, that people over a certain age, won't fit in, to something, which is whatever, but all nonsense. So you just combat it. So give examples that showcase how those things are not true. And even in your resume, you can do that. You can emphasize action points that showcase that that's not true. And then show good energy as best you're capable. Again, this can also be an inclusivity issue. Trust me, I know there are many days I certainly do not feel like showing a lot of energy, but some things that you can do that show energy even when you truly don't feel it are to talk at a slightly quicker pace. Don't rush and still be clear, but talk at a slightly quicker pace. Make sure that you smile as much as possible, which I know is, again, not always comfortable, but it does help to show energy, and use energetic words. So use things like powerful, say things like ignited. I ignited this program and we blah, 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 blah. Use action packed words, and that will help set their mind into a new mindset. So some of my top tips for combating ageism.
I like the word ignited. That's a great word. That's good. Thank you for that. I'd be remiss if I didn't ask this and I didn't have you tell the story, but
Um,
I know, right? Just we talked about this before we started recording. What does it mean to be like Mimi?
Yeah, so it's developed this is like almost hashtag follow me around, like be like Mimi. And it's kind of this saying and this hashtag that's kind of come from my speeches. And I have a fascinating grandmother. And she's, I've talked about her from her career pivots of she was a, just glorious stay-at-home mom that like made her kids clothes and all this kind of stuff for years and years. Then went out and had the 9 to 5, awesome working woman experience in downtown Dallas. Then she was a missionary in Papua New Guinea for a few years randomly, and then decided to help run a business in her 60s. So so she's had this amazing career path. And one of my favorite stories of her to completely debunk ageism is that during COVID, we're a very tight knit family, and my grandmother was very sad because she couldn't see her grands and her great grands, and so she had just gotten a smartphone and learned how to use it. So I said, "Okay, Mimi, I'm going to teach you Zoom." So we went through. I taught her how to request meetings and all that kind of stuff, and how to log into meetings. And she got all that. She was so excited she could see everybody. She just lit up, and she was great. I want to learn something else. So she got enthusiastic about the knowledge. Right? She was super excited. She was, I want to learn something else. I said, we're tired of sending you checks, Mimi. Like this is super annoying. So let's get you some Zelle or some Cash App, and we're gonna learn how to use that. So I set it up. I'm showing her how to use it. She messages everybody in the family. She has 4 kids, a bunch of grandkids, messages everybody, gets money from them. She goes, I want to practice. Send me money. So everybody sends her money. And then they go, okay, so now practice sending it back. And she goes, oh no, Catherine and Joel said that's too hard to learn. I can't do that. So during COVID, my grandmother learned 3 new technologies and how to be a con woman at the age of 87. Don't tell me old people can't learn new things.
That is glorious. That is fantastic. I love it.
Yeah, she's great. And she it was so funny. And it's still a running family joke about the Cash App business. And she even got a sharpshooter badge the year before that, her first time ever shooting a handgun. So I'm like, look, it's all about who the person is. And this is all in her 80s. So I'm going, ageism is not real. It's just about the human and what they can do and where they're at in their life. And I've known 20-year-olds that are stubborn and set in their ways and can't learn anything new. And I've learned, and I've met people, well into their 70s and older still working that are incredible. So ageism is ridiculous. So just let that go and hashtag be
Oh,
like,
that is such a great story. Oh, blessings to her. That's fantastic. I love it.
she's a
Um,
trip.
oh, she sounds it. I love stories like that. That's just
Thank you.
great.
And you know what's great? There's about to be Mimi, Be Like Mimi merchandise, and she's been invited to do her first autograph signing. So
Keep us posted. Keep us
no problem.
posted. Yeah, we'll follow you on LinkedIn and get all that info and stuff
Oh,
like
yes.
that. As we start wrapping up, Katherine, what I'm also curious to know from you, though, is that you choose not to set career goals. And I'm
Right.
wondering if you can just tell us a little more about why you don't do that and how that helps you.
Right. So I set career missions, which are my personal three missions, which are inclusion, integrity, and innovation. So I always want to make sure that I am doing those three things. I'm being inclusive, showing integrity, and I'm innovating, right? So everything I do points to those. But goals to me are so limiting because you're saying, everything I do has to go towards this. Well, why? What if something else cool pops up and you get to pivot and do this other completely crazy thing? I once had an opportunity. I had a goal for myself. This is where I learned not to do this. I had a goal for myself of where I wanted to do my career, and out of nowhere came an opportunity. So I'm a big football fan, and my aunt was on the original Dallas Cowboy cheerleading squad. So I'm a diehard Cowboy fan. And I got the opportunity out of nowhere to go work for the travel partner to the Dallas Cowboys, completely change industries, completely change careers, and go work with football and events, which I'd been doing events and I loved that. So this was just like huge for me. I had done events as a secondary career path. And so it was cool. And if I had just stuck to my goals, I wouldn't have had this other amazing opportunity, which then led to other things and eventually led to my recruiting, which led to me owning my own business. And if I had followed my goal from, my original goal from several years ago, I wouldn't be up on stage speaking as much as I am. I wouldn't be teaching as much as I am. And I'm so much even happier than I ever was before. So the reason that I don't set goals is that they can actually limit you. So instead, I encourage people to set missions. What are the things that feed your soul that you want to make sure you're always doing, no matter what the technicalities and details of your in and out are every single day? Focus on your personal missions, build your brand around that, your personal brand, and then everything else, just ride the roller coaster of life and have fun.
Thank you for that. That's powerful. You've got great stories. You,
Thank
you
you.
really, you really do. And you tell them in a very engaging and interesting way. So I've so enjoyed our time together today. But as
Same.
we near the end here, and this is always the question I ask my guests, what advice would you give someone to help them build their mid-career GPS?
Right. Their mid-career, I like that term too, by the way, the mid-career GPS. I like that.
Thank you.
Again, establish those missions. And it's the things that just feed your soul, whatever those are. And I call them, mine are my three eyes, but whatever it is, and just everything that you do, make sure that you're coming back to that because you'll be happier, you'll be more successful in your job hunts, your growth, all of that. Another big one though is this is the point to get creative and start to really think, what are some things that I can grow into? So at this point, really focus on your growth and what you need, not so much your companies. I mean, I get, take care of them, do good at your job, but think about your growth, your education, and start learning even more new things. Otherwise, the world will pass you by. So learn, focus on your missions, and then wherever those missions take you, run.
It's great. Thank you for that.
Thank
You
you.
get we For the listeners, I always ask my guests before we start recording, what's your intention for our conversation today? And Katherine said she wanted to educate and be very thought provoking. And you've done that. And I thank you for showing up in that way to do that. So, Katherine, if people want to connect with you further, they want to follow you and learn more about you and what you do, I'm going to turn the mic over to you right now. Please give us all the details and share with us how people can connect and follow you further.
Sure, absolutely. So I'm on LinkedIn. I'm actually very easy to find. I'm one of like two Katherine McCords with my spelling in North America. So super simple to find. So follow me on LinkedIn, connect with me. I love to talk to people. So please feel free to message me directly. I also have just gotten onto TikTok. I'm Kat the HR Titan. And so you can find me that way. And then I have my show, Career Launch Live, which will be back in about a month. Very excited about that whole new season, all new exciting topics. It's every Friday, 10 a.m. Eastern Time, live on LinkedIn, YouTube, and Facebook. And then it will roll over eventually to be a podcast. And then my website, titanmanagementusa.com. You can always find me. I'm always happy to come talk to you individually. If you want to hire me to come talk to your class, your networking group, anything like that, feel free to reach out.
I will make sure all of that is in the show notes. Katherine McCord, thank you very, very much for spending some time with us today on the Mid-Career GPS.
Thank you so much for having me again. It was a true pleasure.
Same. So, my friends, I hope you enjoyed today's conversation. And remember, we build our mid-career GPS 1 mile or 1 step at a time, and how we show up matters. Make it a great rest of your day. Thank you for listening to the Mid-Career GPS podcast. Make sure to follow on your favorite listening platform. And if you have a moment, I'd love to hear your comments on Apple Podcasts. Visit johnneral.com for more information about how I can help you build your mid-career GPS, or how I can help you and your organization with your next workshop or public speaking event. Don't forget to connect with me on LinkedIn and follow me on social at John Neral Coaching. I look forward to being back with you next week. Until then, take care, and remember, how we show up matters.